Okay, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. My name is Brandon Young. I am, as always, joined by my partner, Blaine Smith. And we are two friends, one question, half an hour, and zero script. So we're going to tackle a thought today. I'm not even sure if this is exactly a question, Blaine, but I think it's a really good one that has come up recently and worth talking about. So here it is. Basically, how do you engage the work while addressing all of the ancillary elements of being in an organization? Elements like the functions, the positioning of your team, the awareness sharing, the positioning of some of your key leaders and some of your key contributors so that it is clear that they are recognized for their work and maybe even given opportunities of greater responsibility. All of those ancillary elements that aren't really written in the job description, so to speak. How do we think about engaging with the work, doing the actual work that we are required to do and expected to do that leads to mission accomplishment, while also addressing some of those ancillary aspects of life in an organizational culture?
Oh, boy. So this is a good one. And I think what you're saying is, this is maybe more true in large organizations like the government or corporations, is there's a certain amount of game to be played. There's stuff that needs to be done
Yes.
in order for you and your team to be successful. That's not exactly, doing your primary job. It's a good question. And I don't have a swift answer for this one, other than to say, I do feel pretty confident that if you dismiss that entirely, if you really think that I'm just going to keep my head down and do great work and let it completely stand on its own merit, or if you're a leader of a team and you think my team's just going to crush it every day and I'm not going to do any of this other stuff, that's probably not going to work that well for you. My natural disposition would be, I don't want to play any of these games. I don't want to be involved in company politics. I just want to do my job and be confident that that's going to be enough. I think, should you lean heavily that direction? My guess would be yes. Hopefully you're in the kind of organization where you can spend 80 or 85% or more of your time doing that and save a little more for the other stuff. But I think you do have to just come to grips with the fact that people are people and organizations are complex. And there's a lot to being in a relationship with people and being in an organization beyond just making sure that the spreadsheets and the projects and the slide decks are built. And I remember where I learned this very vividly. And it was when I was a Special Forces team leader at 3rd Group at Fort Bragg. And I had this attitude that my team's going to show up every day. We're going to kill it at PT. We're going to train hard. Our team room's going to be clean. Every time we have an opportunity to do anything that has any visibility, we're going to do a great job. Every range is going to be run professionally. And we're just going to quietly build our team into the best team in this battalion. And I think that was the right approach, candidly, to start. But after several months, I had my company commander tell me, hey, Blaine, I need to tell you something. You are not doing a good enough job of cheerleading for your team. And whether you like it or not, part of your job as the commander, and this is a job, by the way, that only you can do and no one else can do for you, you need to let the battalion operations staff, the sergeant major, the commander needs to know what your team is up to. Because I see what you're doing, because I see you in the hallway every morning. I see you guys out doing PT. I come by and check on the range every now and then. I know what you got going on down there and I like it. But you're not going to get a great assignment. You're not going to get extra dollars for training. You're not going to get any of these kind of sexy missions if the higher headquarters isn't aware of what you're doing. And something you need to do and take seriously is cheerleading for your team. And I had to think long and hard about what that meant, what that could look like in a way that was in keeping with my integrity. But the fact of the matter is he was right and I was wrong. And I had to start doing some things, like writing after action reviews of training events. I didn't have to do that. No one was making me do it. But if we spent unit dollars to go to a training event, I did a very brief little slideshow with some photos and a write-up that said, hey, we went to Fort AP Hill for 10 days. This is all the training we did. Here's some photos of the team training. Here's what we got out of it. And I would submit it to the S3, the sergeant major, and the commander so that they knew what we were doing. And that kind of thing quickly elevated the status and reputation of our team in ways that, 6 months of crushing PT sessions and professionally run ranges being done in isolation just was not going to be able to do. So that's always stuck with me. And I've never found it easy, but it's just true.
And it's worth noting that, it wasn't status for status sake. It wasn't a status play. That status and recognition enabled your team to more effectively compete for and conduct missions that needed to be done. And so it was a direct relationship. It wasn't an either or, it was an and. It was doing the work and making sure that folks know that you're doing the work. I think all the time about my time as a sales leader in anatomic pathology. And what we would do is we would represent these laboratories, call it 20-25 anatomic pathologists that had a variety of specialties, whether it be in uropathology or hematopathology, all of these different specialties that they had to bring to bear. And I remember frequently having conversations with them that essentially sounded something like, you're brilliant and you're like the best kept secret because nobody knows what you're doing here. You're like a tree falling in the woods, and we cannot have this tree falling in the woods and nobody's hearing it. So I would really like it if you would be willing to come with me to some of these offices, meet some of these urologists or, hematology oncologists, that you're on the other side of their case, because in the end of the day, they don't know. They don't know that you are a Mayo trained physician. They don't know that about you. They don't know that you guys actually grew up in the same area, and that might actually increase their trust in you, because what you brought this back to, which I frankly didn't see coming, was the point. Relationship. Relationship was the point. And in every organization, regardless of what function your organization is performing in the world, we are all the sum total of our people. So we are all in the people business. We are all in the process of relationship building, relationship managing, relationship maintenance, growing relationships, because if we don't have relation to the inside world or the outside world, we're probably not going to get the opportunity to do the missions that we are most prepared and trained to do. Just like your SF team, you guys were completely capable, competent, ready to go. But if you were just a tree falling in the woods, then no one in the command would have known. And I think about how important it is to connect with others within organizations and create those relationships. I will tell you an example from my experience back in my younger years as a leader in the Army is that I thought the same thing, Blaine. I thought if I just, led the most awesome hardcore squad of assaulters in the Rangers, that we would just be, everything would work out for itself. And I will tell you that I crashed upon the rocks of not developing relationships with people that I needed to develop relationships with. In fact, I was seen as kind of a bit of a punk ass. And in many ways, I probably kind of was by my leader's leader. And that put me in a really bad position, because an incident had occurred eventually in our organization where heads needed to roll for it. And there needed to be one squad leader head rolling off of the chopping block. And even though I was not involved in this incident, it was my head that rolled off of that chopping block, because I never developed the relationship. And I never, quote, played the game and got to know people and got to know that, hey, I'm more than just, some black and white thinking, slope forehead, hard knuckle, hard crushing Ranger here. Like, I actually care, and I want everybody to know what we're doing. And I want to get to know other people within the organization. I found that I made it very easy for those people to go ahead and say, well, why don't we just put this person up there on the chopping block? Because we like this other guy.
Yeah. And it's not just this trade-off of style and substance. I think that's the thing I still think about to this day, frankly, is that if I feel like I'm being self-aggrandizing or promoting even our business, which I know for a fact that we do good work. I'm there every time we do it, and I see the way that audiences and teams respond. Like, I know that we do good work, and I still have, a bone in my body that is hesitant to promote us and the work we're doing, because I just brought up to believe, like, hey, you don't brag, you don't self promote. So I know where that's coming from, and I suspect a lot of people feel that way. But to your point, it would have been a disservice to my unit if the command wasn't aware of how good my team was, because they wouldn't have put us on the field in the ways maybe that they could have, which benefits the mission. Mm-hmm. So you're doing not just your team, but maybe even the greater organization a disservice if people aren't aware of how they can utilize the good work that you're doing. I would also say that having relationships and doing good work or delivering value maybe in no way is mutually exclusive. And so, some of the best relationships I have are ones where, they're not transactional, just value exchange relationships. But make no mistake about it, the reason that I still have these friends or spend time with these people is because we both find value in each other's company. Even the people that I spend time reading online or interacting with on social media, I do so because I find value in what they're bringing to the table. And I hope that people feel the same way about me. And so it's not just about like being buddy or nepotism or that kind of thing, because some people get a little bit ahead doing that from time to time? Sure. Is that a sustainable strategy? Do most of those people get found out eventually? Yes. Yes. So it's okay to develop a relationship and still demonstrate some value to someone. It's not an either or proposition in my mind. And I think if you wanted to get promoted, Brandon, back then by being drinking buddies with the first sergeant, that's a bad approach. And that's going to eventually blow up in your face. Could you have developed the relationship and got yourself promoted more quickly or kept yourself off the chopping block by sharing your monthly PT plan with the first sergeant and saying, hey, this is what we're doing this month. Can you take a look at it and see if this feels good to you? Maybe you're promoting yourself a little bit there by having a monthly PT plan, by showing him how hard your squad is working. But maybe the first sergeant sees that and says, hey, this is good. I want some other squad leaders to start doing monthly PT plans. And it raises the tide for the whole organization. And maybe you've gotten in a little bit of good graces with the first sergeant there. Maybe he at least knows your name and will give you the benefit of the doubt if things go a little sideways. And so it's not about accomplishing all the things you want to accomplish through relationship or through politics. Maybe it's as subtle as getting the benefit of the doubt every now and then. Maybe it's as subtle as I'm going to double check with that person to see if maybe they can help us out, because I've seen them share one or two smart things in meetings, or I read a memo from them talking about what their team was doing and I'd like to know more. There are lots of positive and thoughtful ways we can do this that don't just make you a suck up or a kiss ass. It's just you legitimately sharing the good work that you're doing and hoping other people can find value in it. And is it promotional a bit? Okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think, it reminds me of just the hubris involved with not getting out of your own little circle, your own little bubble, right? Of not, taking the proverbial PT plan to the first sergeant and saying like, hey, what do you think of this? What am I missing? What could I do better here? My son is currently in Ranger school. And, one of the things that we talked about before he went out to Ranger school was he was just sharing how thankful he is to be where he is in the unit that he's in, because he feels like it has been a very humbling experience and he's learned an awful lot. And I said to him, like, man, if you can carry that forward and be the guy in the squad who's humble and who's hungry to learn, you're going to be okay, man. Because here's the gamesmanship involved in Ranger school. Somebody is going to get peered out of that squad. Somebody is going to be on the chopping block on that squad. At the end of Ranger school, every phase you do peer evaluations, because peer evaluations let the cadre see what they cannot see when they're right there in front of you. What happens at chow distribution, what happens at night when you're supposed to be on guard, how all of those little components go when you're supposed to be a great teammate. Do you fall asleep on the ambush line and put your squad at risk, or do you stay awake? Are you the guy that's trying to do the right thing? Peer evaluations give you all of that. And you better believe there's some gamesmanship involved in that. In fact, I will out myself on that right now. I had Jonesy and Chacho and me. We were all in the same squad, and we said, okay, I'm going to rate you number one in the squad. You rate him number one in the squad, and he's going to rate me number one in the squad. That's gamesmanship. There's a little bit of game, being played there. And, going back to the point in how we got to this is that I cannot help but feel that if you're the person who is hungry and you're humble and you're building those relationships, if you want to call it play a little bit of that game, so be it. It's probably going to turn out well for you.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be the kind of teammate that nobody wants to not see advance with them from this phase to the next phase of Ranger School. And you can apply that just like in business, in any setting.
Absolutely. Because the point is it's still both. You're not going to do that for Jonesy and Chacho if those guys were turds. If they weren't looking after other people, if they weren't people that you were willing to be associated with, you're not doing that with them, right? If one of the two guys who was going to be rated the lowest in the squad came to me with that offer, I'd be like, no way, dude. First of all, I'm not rating you number one in good conscience because you're clearly not the best guy in the squad. Second of all, like I don't want to be associated or you're not my ride or die guy in this. I'm only going to do that with somebody who I think I want to be with in the next phase, and I want to go forward with. So,
bro, you stole my MRE last mission.
How do you get the chili mac every time? Someone explain that to me.
I know how.
So that's. I wish I had more articulate, kind of professional thoughts on this, but that's really what it comes down to for me. Is that I want to do life and I want to do business with a pretty small subset of people that I actually really like and trust, and I'm willing to have their back, and I have some confidence they're willing to have mine. And so will I invest some time in those relationships? Will I have some sidebar conversations with those people? Will I make sure that when I have a chance to promote what they're doing, I take the chance to do that because there could be some reciprocity in that for me? Sure. Absolutely. You can't go through life alone. You need buddies. You need allies. You need comrades. Mm-hmm. Like we need to have people that can help carry us through this thing. And it's not always just going to be the people that are on your small team or in your division or in your squad. It may need to be a collection of other people that are arrayed throughout the rest of the organization or who you can lean on in certain times. And so I was just having this conversation recently with somebody that is looking for a job, applying for a job. And there's just, someone write in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but by my estimation, you have about a 0.0001% chance of getting promoted if you blindly submit your resume and cover letter to a LinkedIn job post or something on Indeed or whatever. Like you're just not going to get a job that way. Not a high paying, like a 6-figure job.
I have no data points that would suggest
I don't know
otherwise.
Anyone who that's ever worked for. Conversely, if you have a friend or two friends or former colleagues who you've earned a good reputation with that are working at a company and they contact you and say, hey, we need a district sales manager out in the Pacific Northwest. I think you'd be a good fit. Are you interested in applying? And then you apply for that job. You've got a very good chance, if you're a good candidate, for getting that role because it's all about the relationship. It's all about trust. It's all about being a vetted, known entity who can come into the organization and integrate seamlessly and keep getting things done. And the only way you do that is through having real relationships with people and them feeling like, hey, I'm willing to stick my neck out a little bit for this person, probably because they've supported me in the past. And I don't necessarily think that's politics. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Maybe it is politics. Maybe we have this negative connotation of the word politics in our current culture, but really all politics is at its essence is the ability to compromise for their greater good. It's a willingness to say, hey, look, this may not be 100% what I want, but I'm willing to take 60% of what I want and give you a lot of what you want because ultimately we're going to have a long relationship and this is going to be better for everyone involved. I don't see any problem in doing that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you're making a really important point here, which is that you cannot dismiss the political element unfolding within organizations. Organizations are far more than just the structural elements. How is it arrayed? Is it a more classical organization, kind of top down? Is it more of a matrix organization? That is an element of an organization. It is not the only element of an organization. There's also the political elements that unfold within organizations, and you need to be aware of that. I tell people all the time, the only way you got anything done in the Army is through the relationships that you had
with
in
the
the
supply
Army.
sergeant.
You had to. That's right. You gotta you gotta know the supply sergeant. You gotta know the commo chief. You gotta know the intel. You gotta know the air NCO if you really want to know if or if not you are going to jump next week. You need to actually know these things, right? You need to develop these relationships, because it's not just so simple as saying like this is just a structural element. Bowman and Deal are two thinkers who have written extensively about this in their book around organizational leadership. And I think it's really, really smart just to dial in and make sure that we understand that there are more than just one element unfolding within an organization. And I think it's also important to understand that, some organizations, maybe they factor a little higher on some of the political aspects than they do on the structural aspects, for example. And there's another aspect, but I cannot hip fire it off the top of my head for right now. I'm actually just kind of pleased that I remembered Bowman and Deal. But anyways,
Google it.
Yeah, but it's important to note, like, some index a little more heavily towards the structural, some might index a little bit more heavily towards the political, some might have an even balance. It's important for you to be aware of which kind of an organization that you're functioning within, so that you can be as effective as possible for the mission. And it brings it back to the mission. And something that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, Blaine, is what do you think about some of those folks who may be out there functioning in an organization and just feel like they are swimming in the game, and it is so overbearing that they're having a hard time doing their job, or feeling like they know what their job is. I mean, it might be those people who wake up and say, like, I don't actually know what my job is today. What am I supposed to be doing right now? Because it kind of feels more like my job is to receive and distribute information related to the game, but I'm not quite sure how it relates to doing the job that I've been hired to do. Like, what do you think about those settings for those kind of people?
Yeah, it's a tough question without some specific context, but I'll give a little bit of what might be a counterintuitive example. I would say if you find yourself in an organization where there's a lot of swirl and you feel like there's kind of a lot of politics or the game going on, it's in those settings I would actually recommend you focus more on doing the work, and you take only 10 or 15% of your time to make sure that people are aware that your work's getting done, to make sure that it's at high quality. It's in that environment I would conduct myself as the most pure professional. I'm gonna focus on my work. I'm gonna do a good job. I'm gonna take care of my team, and I'm gonna do just that little bit of extra to make sure that these folks know we've contributed. It was in on time, that kind of thing. Because I think in that environment you can separate yourself as a high character, high performer who kind of rises above the noise and just gets things done. And the added bonus is you can maintain your sanity doing that, because I just don't think in that environment you can keep up. There's kind of no winning at the game if it's so prevalent like that. You're just going to become distracted and worried and burdened. It's going to seep into your team. So I would say in those, let's stick to the work and just do a little bit of the political stuff. I would say in a maybe a healthier or a culture where there's a little bit of less politics, or maybe it's mostly devoid of politics, I'd go to the other side of the coin. And I'd say that might be an opportunity where if you want your team to really grow, if you want to advance and move quickly, there's a chance where you could be the person that develops relationships and helps people out and earns a little bit of trust and reputation more broadly across the organization. And you might then stand out as somebody who doesn't just do great work, but also takes the time to get to know people, to look out for people, to anticipate their needs, and to go a little above and beyond. So I don't know if it's exactly like an inverse relationship, but me just answering off the top of my head, that's what I would say. If there's a ton of political swirl and kind of game being played, try to block a lot of that out. You focus on what you can control, do great work, make sure people know you're doing great work. If there's almost none of that going on, then that might be a chance for you to step up if you're comfortable and be a bit of a connector, be a bit of a relationship builder, and elevate yourself as somebody who can not just do good work, but who can, elevate others and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like that. I find that incredibly orienting, Blaine. I appreciate the inverse relationship you've just drawn from this, and I think that's something that we can all think about. The only thing that I would add to it is that if you feel that you're in a setting where there's just kind of the constant swirl going on and you feel like it is inhibiting your ability to do the work, I would just be willing to engage with some of the fray with some thoughtful questions. I have found myself in this kind of setting before, and one of the really helpful questions that I developed in that time was just to kind of stop. I've always felt like for whatever reason, people just like to tell me things. And, people just start telling me these things and it sounds an awful lot like gossip. And I'm just like, well, hold on a second. Like, can I just ask a question? Is this informative or instructive? I just need to kind of wrap my head around it. Am I supposed to be receiving this information with the intent that I am going to now do something, or there's going to be an action on the back end of this, or are you sharing just for sharing's sake? And I would say about 85 to 90% of the time when I would ask that question, often it would be, no, I just wanted you to know this. No, I just wanted you to be aware of this. No, I just wanted to share this idea with you. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, right on. That's super cool. Hey, can we maybe like grab a beer or chop it up over lunch or something like afterwards? Because I'm super focused on, moving this thing, down the line. And so, I don't know if that made me be seen as, kind of a contrarian or a jerk or anything like that. It certainly was never my point. But my point was to, in a way, softly reorient away from the swirl and back to the mission while still maintaining the relationship and encouraging the connection. I hear you. I understand what you're saying. Help me understand what I'm supposed to get from this. And then, maybe we can kind of move on from there, because sometimes in that, like I said, 10 to 15% of the time, it was like, no, this is really important. This is going to impact the manner in which we take our strategy to market. So it's like, okay, then full stop, because I'm actually halfway down the road on this project that is in line with the strategy as I understand the operating environment to be. But if what you're telling me is that this actually is altering the operating environment, then let's just pause and kind of engage with this information, because it might actually be instructive. And to kind of wrap it up, and I'll kick it back over to you to land the plane here. Like, I think that is kind of part of the point, is that if we have the horse blinders on and we're just saying like, I'm just going to do the work and work, and I'm not going to engage outside, we might actually miss some pretty important information that is relevant to the mission that we are trying to conduct. And we don't want to be in that setting.
Yeah, Brandon, I totally agree. I think the last thing I would just say to wrap this up is that, like almost everything we talk about, this is probably a false dichotomy. It's not an either or proposition. Sure, we want to do great work and we want to keep our head down and focus for the most part. And we want to make sure that we have relationships, and we want to make sure that leaders understand the great work our team is doing, because that's all part of the process too. I would also say it's not really a zero-sum game. It's not like, hey, if I do 75% good work and 25% politics. I think there are plenty of people out there that are great examples of people who are high on the quality of their work and they're high on the quality of their relationships. So don't feel like you're always having to take from one in order to give from the other. At the end of the day, it's not, what's the old saying? It's not what you know, it's who you know. I would say it's what you know and who you know. And so take both those things seriously, build good relationships, help people out where you can, be a good cheerleader for your team. If they're doing great work, it's not a crime for people to know they're doing great work. And I think ultimately, you can stay focused and be fine. I really like this question, or or statement or whatever it is that we're addressing here today. It's been a fun
I
one
like
for
the
us.
conversation.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation. And we'd love to hear your questions. So please, if you've got any thoughts on this, or you have a question that you want to see us interact with on the show, we would love to meet you and we'd love to hear it. So please send us a note to contact@appliedleadershippartners.com. We read every one of them and we'll get as many as we can here on the podcast. And until next time, see you soon.